Hey everybody, I guess we'll get started. What's up? I'm Rachel Cook. I'm the founder of Seeds. Seeds is the easiest way to ask the blockchain for help and receive it as a gift with no strings attached. So it's like a decentralized GoFundMe. You want to help developers get money for projects. We competed in TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield in 2016, went through Techstars in 2015, and the Boost VC Bitcoin Accelerator in 2014. And we're now doing a token sale. And our front-end tools help game developers convert more paying customers. So we're kind of at the intersection of all this stuff we're about to talk about today. So I thought what we could do is just go down the panel and you guys could each introduce yourselves. And I had a couple questions and then I thought we could open it up to the crowd. So right on, we just have 2 mics. Cool. Yeah,
to start. Hi, I'm Julia Polatowska. I've been in games for a long time. I joined a company called G5 when it was developing pre-iPhone mobile games. And then we jumped on the iPhone mobile train pretty early in 2009. I stayed for 7 years until we did listing on Swedish NASDAQ. Then I moved to the UK, spent 3 years there, mostly with London Venture Partners on the investment team. And recently I left and moved to San Francisco to start my own company, which is like not announced, too early to discuss. But because of my investor experience, I'm here. I'm also advising a few companies on fundraising things.
Hi, my name is Shanti Bergel. I've been in games for about 25 years, the first half of which was in game production. So I was a game producer. I worked on games like FIFA and The Sims, and then later made the move over to corporate development and to investment. So I've been kind of an active angel investor and also a corporate investor in games for about 10 years now. So my personal investments in game studios include Super Evil Megacorp and Armada Interactive. My corporate investments include companies like Ayudo, which is actually a developer of Walking Dead for Scopely and Mortal for Warner. And I have been in investments and acquisitions, if you saw the last panel, kind of esoteric finance for a grand total of about 25 years.
Hi, my name is Josh. Actually been working my own for about 6 years, mobile gaming space focus. So I work with a lot of studios, help their own various business areas, especially in the last couple of years. I've been more focused around M&A, investment opportunities, as those become more challenging, looking at more creative ways for people to fund their projects as well as start up new companies.
Great. My name is Miko, and I'm actually a little bit relatively new to the gaming space. I am a gamer myself, but that doesn't make me an expert in the industry. I have joined, however, Gumi Ventures, and Gumi Ventures is a publicly traded company of about 850 employees headquartered in Tokyo. They have game studios all around the world, including San Francisco, Helsinki, and in Seoul, Korea. And they have multiple venture investment funds that invest in gaming. Most recently, they have a venture reality fund that has about 100 portfolio companies now. It's one of the most prolific investors in AR/VR, and I'm a partner in the upcoming crypto investment fund. So it's a $20 to $30 million fund that will be investing principally in blockchain-based efforts. So personally, I'm an advisor to 14 token sales, as well as a founder in a cryptocurrency exchange called Evercoin. So I come a little bit more from the crypto side than from the game side, but we're excited to see synergies between these areas.
Hi, my name is Jim Ying. I'm with CD Capital. We're a Shanghai-based investment bank that primarily brokers late-stage investment and M&A deals out of Asia. We worked on several transactions where it's a Western company or a seller that's looking to raise funds from China, Korea, or to sell. Personally, my background is in games for around the last 15 years with Xbox, Six Waves, Free, and Tango, mostly on the operations and investment side of things.
Right on. Okay, I wanted to ask you guys if you would dive a little bit deeper into your specific interest at the intersection between blockchain and gaming investment-related things, or if you fall more on one side, then you could do that. Yeah.
Do you want to start, Mika?
I'm happy to take a crack. So here's the thing that I think from the basis, which is that people often misunderstand Satoshi Nakamoto and his vision. So he's the pseudonymous founder of Bitcoin. If you're interested, there's a wonderful book called The Book of Satoshi. It's a collected emails of Satoshi Nakamoto. The thing that people don't understand is they really don't understand blockchain. They really think blockchain is just a data structure which chains blocks of transactions. So that's really a very dim and limited view. And enterprise people are all desperately trying to ignore cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and they're desperately trying to convince everyone that blockchain should exist without cryptocurrency. As such, they're divorcing things like consensus algorithm. They're divorcing a lot of really meaningful layers on top. But
Why do you think that is?
because they're centralizers. So enterprises are centralizers, and the notion that decentralization blows them up from the inside makes them constitutionally incapable of metabolizing the idea that decentralization could disrupt their business model. So, and by the way, this isn't all companies. There are some amazingly forethoughtful companies, such as Facebook, that have tilted up a blockchain division. And when they say it's a blockchain division, one of their first projects is a cryptocurrency, right? So they're really actually fighting fire with fire. So I don't think they're all dumb. But the point I'd like to say with this is what has got me excited is that one of the biggest insights around decentralization is the notion that one of the big insights of Satoshi is if you can block economic free riders, which are people that are stealing value from your community, so if you can block them, and you can incentivize people that are adding value to your community, then the network becomes effectively self-inflating. So it essentially becomes a Metcalfe's law valued, self-inflating network. So the reason why I think gaming is meaningful in this is that people talk in crypto a lot about game theory, but it isn't actually just theory. It's practice, right? And the people who have the most understanding of kind of behavioral dynamics at scale, like for example, there's two classes of people that understand the formation of crypto economies. One of the classes of people are central bankers, of which there are probably 1,000 on the planet. The other class are people who have designed in-game economies. So to me, people who understand crypto economies largely come from gaming. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I do have a crazy story, which is Brock Pierce, who's one of the godfathers of the cryptocurrency movement.
And a star of The Mighty Ducks,
Yes,
I believe?
and a child actor star of The Mighty Ducks, that's true, with Emilio Estevez. Brock Pierce got his start in cryptocurrency with the World of Warcraft gaming, Chinese gold mining outfit. And the executive that he hired from Goldman Sachs to run it was a guy by the name of Steve Bannon, who's got famous for his role in the Trump administration. But I don't want to rant too much, but the only thing I wanted to click on crypto from the beginning has been tied to gaming. And so I think that's kind of an intrinsic vibe that comes out of the crypto world. So that's my 2 cents.
Jim, you want to go?
Yes, my background is not in crypto, it's mainly in gaming, and so for me, a lot of this is kind of getting up to speed on what's going on also. So the interesting things I see is because crypto, the technology allows you to place scarcity value on a lot of the digital goods, and a lot of people are thinking that's how we're going to leverage this technology in the game so that there's value in these goods that are created within the games and they can either sell them or trade them. I think that part is particularly interesting on the gaming side. So personally, I'm interested in kind of seeing how all that plays out.
I think the other thing is also like as a funding source, moving away from traditional channels, being able to sort of self-fund is an interesting ideal. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that in terms of the reality, especially if we looked at like the history of things like Kickstarter and whatever with games, didn't necessarily play out very well. So, I mean, I think
Why do you think that?
What?
Can you elaborate on what you mean?
No, I mean, I just think that a lot of people overpromised and underdelivered, and there was initially definitely a lot of interest from the community, and people kind of potentially took advantage of that, and then that kind of wore away. I mean, we don't see that a lot these days. So I think it's definitely interesting conceptually to move away from being dependent on traditional funding sources, and especially on the platform side, being able to move away, decentralized like game distribution. But we're still my perspective is still pretty far off from that being a possibility, just based on from a consumer perspective where people discover content, things like this.
Yeah, I also come from games, and so for me, I tend to look at it through that lens. And the big shift is, as Miko's brought up, is centralization versus decentralization. I look at it, as a game developer, a game player, a games investor, what does that improve? What can you do now that you couldn't do before? Does it make something traditional better? Can you distribute better? Can you, make a better game? Can you unlock a play experience or a distribution experience or even a marketing experience that you couldn't before? And I think that's the interesting aspect of any new platform, and it really needs to be seen from my perspective whether or not blockchain represents that type of opportunity set or not. The experimentation that I've seen personally with regard to designs that are based on blockchain and the use of cryptocurrencies in particular feel very early to me. They don't feel oh, I'm going to stop playing something that I'm already playing and start doing this. They do feel you have to, as a player, be kind of a crypto enthusiast first and the game player second or 10th. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you look at CryptoKitties, which I think is the kind of widely referenced, kind of archetypal crypto game, there's a lot to be interested in here. I think it reminds me a little bit of Fluff Friends in the early days of the Facebook platform. I think the big difference, of course, is that Facebook was clearly a distribution vehicle for game developers, and so there was something behind it that you could kind of look at and say, all right, well, this is, that's the wave, and that's going to be the difference that we're going to.
Can you guys? I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you guys hear Shanti? Everyone can hear okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I mean, to flip it around, the question, if I was a games developer, what would I be doing right now if I was starting up a shop and I didn't have, my first project and I was just trying to figure out what it is that I'm going to make? Would I do crypto first, or would I do AR, or would I probably wouldn't. I think it's early. I think it is a realm of experimentation. There might be wages that you earn by being early. I really don't know. If you want to access a platform at scale, mobile is still that. The best platform that we have right now is still mobile. I mean, mobile is massive. There are 2.5 billion smartphones out there. The monetization model is established. The ecosystem is established. It is a red ocean in certain categories, but certain categories are being discovered, and so it depends on what type of company you want to make and what kind of team you are. And so I think if you're really into crypto and you're really into experimentation, knock yourself out. There might be something there. I don't see it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not coming.
As an investor, I have experience in venture capital, not with crypto. I guess as an investor, I would think that there are different ways you can raise money, and in some cases, crypto can be better ways than others. As a gamer, I have spent thousands of dollars in some of the games, so I do see value how I could actually own some of the items across different games and experiences, so that right now I have no way to get my money back or resell what I bought, because I was spending money in mobile games primarily, so there are no good markets. But I do see value in crypto there. As a game developer, as Shanti said, I would probably not start with blockchain technology as the base of my business, but if if I prove some other things, I can see how I can add value to my players down the road. but I don't think that my first players will be crypto early users.
Nico has something to say.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at something like CryptoKitties, like people really look at that as kind of like a deep integration, right? Because you're talking about the emergence of this kind of non-fungible asset, you know, and so you're talking about the emergence of this kind of new class of game, right? To me, it's super not exciting, you know, because
What specifically?
CryptoKitties by itself, in and of itself, because to me, like, you know, most people in the room here are gamers, and so to me the game comes first. And I think what we're hearing from the panel too is like the game should be fun, and otherwise what's the point, right? I think there are a couple areas though that I think are super interesting. I think obviously the financing area was mentioned, and I think it's a valuable concept, and I think that's definitely going to be increasingly this kind of intersectional zone between people who are financing things and people who are using things, right? So whether it is Kickstarter-y or whether it's more like, you know, if you think about shareholding, the ability to hold equity in a company, it's kind of more cumbersome than the ability to hold tokens. So I think that there's more liquidity, and that may actually improve the overlap between player and owner, right? So I think that's an interesting model. But I can tell you a segment where you're going to see immediate explosive gains is in kind of money gaming / gambling, right? So if you recently, I think it was the Supreme Court just made a ruling on sports betting. And I think that will be an area where there'll be extremely explosive growth, and you know, we're going to see a lot of downstream coming from that area. So I think there is you know, that whole segment, money gaming and gambling, I think will be huge. I'm advising one relevant player, which is Lottery.com, which is doing an ICO. I think they're looking at about 300 million USD raise. Another one is that I did that was smaller, was a $10.5 million hard cap, which was PlayKey, which is basically creating streaming gaming for people who have really bad PCs, you know, and it's a very weird little tiny sub-market, but they basically decentralized the streaming service into miners. So the miners, so the end users are paying in crypto, and then the miners are basically streaming from their servers, and they're collecting coins through that process. So that's a decentralization play. But I think just to put a capstone on this conversation, to me, someone asked me, should I do an ICO, like a startup founder? And I said, that's completely the wrong question, and a borderline meaningless question. The correct question should be, should I incentivize my users? Right, and the reason why I think that, and if the process of incentivizing your users includes a token sale, good for you and go for it, right? But to me, the reason why I encourage them to incentivize their user base is that they will soon be competing against someone who is incentivizing their user base. And if you actually have two things held equal, again, the game has to work as a game, right? So in other words, if you have two things held equal, the only way to make them equal is if they're both fun, like in gaming. So, but if they're both equally fun and one of them rewards you and the other one doesn't, which one are you going to play? So I think that's the kind of like twist to the tail, I think, which is incentivize user community or non-incentivize user community. And I think that's going to change the fundamental stakes of competition in the space. That's my feeling. Yeah.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just saying with CryptoKitties, I think we're at like, you know, version 1 of what's possible. It's basically just, you know, a lot of collection. There's not much game experience, gameplay. I think there's also a lot of speculation. I mean, you have sort of people in the experience, you know, maybe for the collecting part, and maybe it's just people speculating. But, you know, I think it's indicative if you look at like mobile games or, you know, social games, the first stuff was super simplistic. To me, the thing that's interesting is the cross-game potential of leveraging these digital assets like across games. I think that's definitely coming. That's something that's pretty unique and pretty interesting, especially if there is some like monetary, you know, value behind it. But I think we're super early in terms of like the gameplay experience, where, you know, it's very, very limited.
So I'll ask the audience, are most of you guys here because you're interested in gaming more so than crypto? If you raise your hands. Gaming, game developers, yeah.
Nobody here is from crypto.
Yeah? Anyone from the crypto space primarily? Yeah? Cool. Okay. Are you guys interested in hearing about how to raise money for your games, mostly?
You may, sir.
Yeah? Is that what brought you in here? Yeah. Okay, cool. Got it. So for my part, I'll say we raised $1 million in seed capital from traditional investors, went through a Bitcoin-focused startup accelerator, like I said, in 2014. Our first tool was an SDK product to give to game developers to let their users help people in need, which made them like 60% more likely to start spending in an app. So that's where we started. We were kind of looking at gaming initially. With our tokens, you should check this out if you're interested to do like a self-promotional thing, but genuinely, it's seedstokens.com. With the tokens, you can redeem them to ask the network for help with any project. And then rather than a Kickstarter type sort of like silo, we're then sharing that through the network of apps and games that are using our products. So we can get your need in front of like 15 million users at current to ask them to contribute micro amounts, and then we'll just gift that to you. So this is an example of an alternate fundraising mechanism where you're not chasing investors and doing all the legwork and going through that rejection, which I've gone through myself for years. We can just get you capital. Small amounts right now, but as the network grows, of course, we can do more. Yeah, so how about, does anyone have any questions that you wanted to ask anyone specifically?
I actually have a question.
Yes.
Because Shanti was talking before about selling assets and selling the live games, and then there was a discussion about crypto. How do you think that the investment market is going to work in the future? Are we talking about having different kinds of investments for different kinds of games, or is there a tendency of focusing on one specific kind of investment?
Did you repeat the question when you answered? So Shanti, right?
I kind of see it as
Julie, could you repeat the question since I probably couldn't hear it?
So, what is going to happen with different kinds of fundraising strategies, right? Like, is crypto going to make everyone else obsolete or not? Is it the question? Yeah.
Yeah, or if we're going to have different kinds of investments for different kinds of developers. What is the tendency?
From my point of view, this is just different tools. Like, you can use different strategies and tools depending on what you want to achieve. I know many developers, game developers, game companies, entrepreneurs who want to raise venture capital. This is selection bias, obviously, because my experience was in venture capital. So this is one way to fundraise if you want to commit to certain pattern that your VC investors want to see and can help with. If this is the way you want to work, I think venture capital can be great. If you want to serve a certain community, let's say that is early adopters of crypto, then ICO is probably a good strategy. I'm not so experienced in that, but I'm sure it works. Then there is crowdfunding, and many of the companies that we invested in venture capital, they used crowdfunding as marketing strategy. They would start off, sometimes they would actually come to investors after successful crowdfunding and say, we've got so many users who are waiting for us to start shipping. So this would be a strong argument for venture capital investors to invest, because you already proved there is some market fit with your early adopters on Kickstarter, for example. So I think depending on what you want to achieve, you can use all of this simultaneously or one by one, and I don't think that any of this is going to be obsolete anytime soon. My view.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like all of these are just tools for kind of achieving the goals that you have. Your access to them, kind of is dictated by the plan you have, the team that you have, and the connections that you have. But there are certain ones that are kind of more democratized. So for example, perhaps ICOs are a more democratized tool. Personally, I'm less bullish on them than perhaps some of the other panelists. Just because I've seen some of the complexities downstream that can result from doing a couple of convertible notes on top and then an ICO and then trying to go for an equity round. Like what exactly are you trying to sell an investor at that point? It gets very complicated. It can get very complicated with traditional methods, where you go from convertible notes to equity and then start doing debt. Explaining yourself to kind of the next wave of investors, if that's what your kind of investment profile is going to look like, is always something that you have to account for. And if you are going to be discussing with American investors, a series of foreign-based ICO tokens, for example, the tax profile may be prohibitive for them. They may not understand exactly what they're supposed to do with that. Whereas your competitor is raising on a safe note from YC, and they're like, oh, well, I know what that means. I understand how to process that. And so that may or may not be kind of the best choice of tools for you. Also, no real kind of answer except for to say pick the right tool for the job, but recognize that not everybody in the investment ecosystem is a swish on crypto. And so the later stage investors in particular, may not be able to process what the hell you're talking about when you show up at a mixed cap table like that.
One area that I'd be curious to see how it plays out is the parallels between companies that are raising through ICOs and companies that were thinking of crowdfunding. So I think early on when the gaming companies saw a lot of success on the crowdfunding side, a lot of companies thought, oh, why we're never gonna have to raise VC money ever again, we'll just be able to crowdfund our way. And I think what we've seen over time is that crowdfunding for games has not been as successful as some of these companies originally thought. The companies that have been really successful are ones that have been building on nostalgia, or already have the name brand out there, either with the developer or the IP, and so they're able to pull in a lot of that interest just out of the gate based off of the name. And right now, I feel like on the ICO side, there's potential for some of that, but then also a lot of people who are putting money in are purely on the speculation side of things. And so maybe it's early enough where they're not necessarily investing based off of the quality of the content or how successful, maybe they think it'll be successful, but it's not actually off of something more material. And will that, over time, will it become more concentrated in terms of crowdfunding, where it's only the most interesting opportunities that are able to gather those funds?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really interesting also is recent as FIG, which is essentially, funding from the crowd with an actual opportunity for return. So that to me becomes really interesting. I've never crowdfunded a game, but if there's a developer that's sophisticated and I think that they can make a product that can return some profit, then to me, as the average person, I can actually participate in that. So that's something that's fairly new and still obviously emerging, but is pretty compelling.
The idea with tokens, of course, is that there's a secondary market on an exchange like Evercoin or whatever, which Kickstarter doesn't have. Is there another question from the audience? Anybody?
That's fine, because I just wanted to rant a little bit, if it's okay. Oh,
Did you want to say something?
Question?
Yeah, my question wasn't so much about investment, but more on the publishing side of things. Like, what advice would you have to someone who doesn't so much need the money, but needs engagement, needs help, publishing something to a wide audience?
That's so. Let me rephrase the question or repeat it, and you can nod your head if it's or yell if it's wrong. But the question really was more about the publishing side, which is not as much fundraising, but the question becomes, how do you get more of a boost in terms of the game publishing aspect, which kind of, okay, so I'm getting a nod, so that was the question. What I would love to do is actually talk about the potential evolution of the space, because I think one of the things that I'm feeling right now from the panel is too much of a flavor of a snapshot of a point in time, right? Which is, I think that what I'm hearing from the panel is today, there's crypto investors and there are gamers. Today, there's ICOs and there's crowdfunding and there's VC, right? So to me, that's all true, but what we're talking about here is an exponential technology, right? And so the idea that you can take crypto as a snapshot, most of what happens when people take crypto as a snapshot is that they come up with things to complain about, like you can't buy a sandwich with Bitcoin, or people come up with these things that, if you think about the $6.5 billion of ICO that have been raised, that's a very large talent grab, right? So there's a lot of really good engineers working on a lot of really interesting problems in crypto.
But how does this relate to the question about publishing? To bring it back to that.
So let me bring it home. So what I want to say is this, right? Which is, I think what I'm talking about is, in the future, we're talking about the synthesis of Nouveau platforms. So I think that's what's going to emerge, will be basically crypto-fueled game platforms, right? So I think if you remember mobile-fueled game platforms, it was all about users, right? And the platforms consisted of big piles of users. The thing that I think will be really interesting will be, you know, essentially platforms that are glued together by a token. And those platforms may actually straddle AR, VR, desktop, mobile, like they may actually straddle web, casual, social. They may straddle all these different categories, but they may be glued together by a token, right? And they may actually be, and the thing to me that I think in the future will be convergent will be this notion of crypto investors versus users versus, there may not be a versus, right? So if Facebook actually succeeds, that'll be another billion wallets. Right, so you know it's going to be a really interesting shift. So that's what I would say is, like, you know, and that may not answer your question today, but I think for the near future you can imagine a converged platform that's glued together by a token. So I don't know if anyone else has a take on that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Just to clarify, you're basically looking at from an investment perspective, or just you're looking for a publisher and trying to understand like how to best go about that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit separate from this topic, but I mean, yeah, I think from the mobile gaming space?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you basically, you know, these days it's a tougher model to make it work. You need to be like pretty diligent about understanding like what you specifically are looking for. If it's just someone to push traffic to your game, or you need other capabilities, operational capabilities for like customer support or like localization, things like this, or platform partnerships. So yeah, I mean, I think you just want to do significant diligence in talking to companies, making sure that, you know, talking to other developers they've worked with. But in terms of sourcing opportunities, I think it's pretty straightforward. You come to these events, a lot of the publishers are here looking in the App Store, stuff like that. And then working through your workflow in terms of what you're looking for operationally, as well as on the business side, to find someone that fits within those criteria. And then hopefully some subset of those will be interested in your actual product. But it is a pretty tough model these days to make work, no matter what type of game or scale you're operating at.
I think London Venture Partners was good about helping that specifically, right? Yeah. Like Supercell.
Yeah, well, I personally also have a lot of experience in publishing. Like, I was responsible for publishing at G5, and then while at London Venture Partners, I consulted our companies on publishing strategy. So I think what you're saying, Miko, is that in the future, so publishers are now seen as companies that hold this user base, and they can give you a push if the audience is right for your game. But what you're saying is in the future, publishers might become obsolete because no one is going to be able to hold the same user base that well if crypto and decentralization works out. But I think for today, I would suggest, depending on the game that you're developing and depending on the audience, I would scan publishers that have the best fit for your game. Like, for example, FunPlus is one of those, and maybe Shanti can have a look depending on what you do. But yeah, so actually you can come, we can speak later. I have good database of publishers with some insights, but basically you just try to find a good fit for your game in existing, primarily from user base perspective, I would say. And then you can approach them with a pitch and hopefully get the right fit. Because from my perspective, I think one thing that I can help with is obviously some funding to finish your game, but second, that is probably bigger from my point of view, is the right user base that they can cross-promote your game to, especially if they have developed strong relationships with their users, so that they don't just throw games against the wall and see what sticks, but they actually work with their user base. As an example of this is my former company G5. They work with female audience primarily. that love adventure games on mobile. So if your game falls in this category, it might be a good publisher for you. Then there are other publishers specializing in different stuff.
So one clarification that I have for you is, are you interested in a publisher primarily for the capital side of it or for the distribution marketing side of things?
Just the distribution side of things. Yeah, I mean, like, what I'm mostly interested in is how to figure out what to look for and what to see on that distribution side, because it seems quite difficult to me to figure out.
I would say why even, so I spent several years on the publishing side with 6waves, Tango. My question would be, why do you feel like you need a publisher? Because if you've already funded the game and you've already developed it and you're able to market it so that you see what some of the metrics are, then if the metrics are strong, then either you have cash flow that's coming off that you can market the game some more, or you can raise funding to market the game yourself. Because when you do sign with a publisher, you give up a lot of, even if you're not giving away the IP, you're giving a lot of rev share rights. And then when you're down the line looking at a potential exit or even though just long-term viability of the game, any publisher is going to want some sort of lock-in for that.
I think one thing that they can give you, if they're good for you, is free traffic. So your actual user acquisition cost is going to be much lower, but only if it's a good fit. It's not, I agree with you that there are many considerations.
One example of kind of this disaggregation, disintermediation pattern is I'm an advisor to a crypto company called Referium. And Referium basically allies with people like Twitch streamers in order to create referral networks that are paid out in cryptocurrency. Now, one of the real interesting enablers in crypto is that you can actually write very small checks, in quotes, to people in other countries, right? So in other words, it solves problems of international payment for people doing referrals, right? So as a discovery engine, it creates a really interesting kind of independent disaggregation around streamers as kind of a referral source for game people selling games, right? So, you know, you can potentially get low cost of acquisition through tying yourself up with appropriate streamers. Depending on the nature of your game, some games don't stream very well and others do. So I mean, you know, there's many avenues for that. You know, that's just an example of a crypto-fueled mechanism for channel low-cost customer acquisition.
Yeah, on a related note, with our tool, whenever we launch in a new app, our front-end products are in a new app, we let the user base of token holders know that we're in that app to send them to the app. So that's another alternate sort of crypto-related example. Anybody else got a question? How are we on time?
You have like 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Well, I have one, but it might be a very basic question. Like, as an investor, including cryptocurrency investor, what would you ask? Like 3 questions, like every developer must give you answer immediately. Like 1, 2, 3. Say me right now your numbers, your growing, or whatever it is. Like.
Instead of being just in crypto, could it be to any investment?
Including in crypto, yeah.
So I think the question is, what is any investor going to ask? And I think this is one thing that is very important. So any investor, from a financial standpoint, they're looking for the 10 times return. They're looking for the 100 times return. And from a game developer or a company founder perspective, that may be one route that you're looking to do. But one area where sometimes the incentives aren't aligned is that if a game developer or a founder is establishing a business where they can just kind of cash flow it and they're not looking for that crazy return, I'd say don't worry about finding a VC because your incentives are going to be misaligned. Because let's say as a founder, if you have the opportunity to exit for like 2-3 million, that's a pretty good payoff for you. From a VC perspective, that's never going to be interesting. All right, so one question that they're always going to get, even if they don't come out and ask you, is what is the 10 times, 100 times return for me? And if you don't have a good answer or your business isn't set up for that, then I don't think the VC route is right for you.
Cool. So my top 3 will be basically since we're early stage folks. To me, it's team, traction, and idea. right? And so when I talk about idea, I'm really looking for, as much fully baked of an idea as possible. And in some ways, these all end up being kind of sort of fungible. So for example, if you have a super experienced team, you may actually not need as much traction. But if you have an inexperienced team, you probably need more traction, right? And ultimately, when I look at an idea, I'm also looking at things like total addressable market, right? Which is how big of an idea is it from a market perspective, right? So team traction and idea, to me, again, even idea and team can be fungible. So for example, if you have an idea that looks like a very small idea, if you have an incredibly experienced kind of unicorn team, that's fine, because they'll dominate that microsegment, and then they'll know enough to be able to like jump into a much bigger thing from that position, right? So the point I would make is that team traction and idea, pick two, right? And that's more my feeling.
Yeah, no, I think that's directionally similar to what you hear from a lot of investors, depending on the stage, of course. So at early stage, I think team, is 1 through 3, but second after team is what are you building and why. So I think in games in particular, demonstrating that you have some insight related to that player base or kind of that game type that is interesting and unique. And will lead you to an outcome that is, to Jim's point, worthy of that investor type. So if it is a venture investor, he's right. You're going to basically need to demonstrate kind of a return profile that maps to kind of what their fund is all about. If they're not, perhaps you can kind of find a lower bar that's kind of appealing to them. Be careful, however, is that, I've seen, particularly, I think this is much more common in Europe than it is here, but I've seen companies that have investors from outside the industry or outside the, kind of the venture world, some investor who they got money from a trucking business or, a restaurant owner or something, who don't understand games and don't understand how it works, don't add any value whatsoever, and then block their, kind of opportunities over time. And so, I would think, there is reason to kind of look for quote unquote smart money first, and the smart money is probably going to be very interested in who your team is and whether you've worked together and have you got direct experience in this particular game type.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think right now, especially in the market for game studios, team is by far number one. I mean, if you don't have expertise and be able to show commercial success, if you be able to have a team with commercial success, even from previous studios, that opens a lot of doors. If it's project funding or studio funding, outside of that, it's pretty challenging, and has been for actually a while from my perspective.
Which stage is this?
Say it again, please.
Which stage?
Well, earliest. Indie developer.
Then it's a team. In my experience, usually this early team, if there is some lack of skill in the beginning, some of the most important aspects of the business are not covered in this team in terms of experience. Usually this problem persists as you grow. Very often, for example, if you have super business person running team, but product part is lacking, often it continues like this, not for too long, just the company would shut down probably, or vice versa, product team is amazing, but then business part might be. So usually investors like to see everything covered, or almost everything covered in the early team, more or less. And then I think if it's a game, then the fund like London Venture Partners will definitely ask about your user acquisition strategy. It should be compelling because users are scarce in a way, it's expensive to acquire them, so it should be something special. Perhaps through influencers is one way, there should be something that makes sense, that you know how you are going to acquire users beyond just paying for each install.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep, I think we're good. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Thank you.